With many people now trying to save a bit of extra cash, I thought I'd run you through how to replace brake discs and brake pads on our little Ford Fiesta training vehicle here. Okay, so the first thing we did was we jacked the vehicle up, we put it on jack stands, and it's very safe. One of the things you'll have to do is be able to move your hub assembly left and right, which means you have to unlock the steering column. So normally it's just a matter of putting the key in and turning it to accessory to unlock that steering lock mechanism, so you can freely move that either side. Because what we're going to have to do is we have to get in here and remove the caliper off so we can take the brake disc off. That's one of the first things that we have to do once we've got to this point. So make sure you can move that steering by releasing that steering lock. And obviously then we'll start undoing the bolts behind there and pull the caliper off. Okay, so now we've got the caliper up and out of position there, and we've got it resting on top of the disc itself. This is what we want to get to be able to replace the brake pads. Now, you might notice these pads aren't too badly worn, but we have a badly shuttering disc here. Now, the reason for that could be many, but we want to replace the discs, and obviously when you put new discs on, it's really good and advisable to replace the pads at the same time. Normally it's the other way around, you need to replace the pads and you have to consider whether or not you have to put discs on, but in this instance we've got warp discs and therefore we're just going to replace the lot. So be very careful, they do contain fibres. Now, you really should wear a mask when you're replacing these, and obviously I'm going to do that when I handle the pads, but obviously talking to you about it now, looking at them, it's okay, but we don't want to ever touch these pads. The old ones were full of asbestos. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to wind the piston back inside the caliper. The way you can do that is one of these G-clamps. There is a special tool you can get to fit in there, but it doesn't always work when you've taken the caliper off because it's got this piece in here. So G-clamps, you can't go past them. Been using these since Noah was a boy, and it's the best way of pushing back a piston. So you position the G-clamp in like that, so it clamps onto the back of the caliper, and now we wind this in, and what we want to do is we want to push these pads back, which you want to do it very gently. So go easy and you start winding it back. It should go back easy. Now the complication with this is if it doesn't go back easy and gets stuck, it means your dust boot, which is in here at the back here, and that's what actually controls your piston from being dirty and stops the dust getting inside there. If that's compromised in any way, what's going to happen is your piston won't go back and you can damage the seal inside the caliper, and you're going to need a caliper rebuild. So if you need a caliper rebuild, I fully suggest you do that with a motor mechanic. Don't try and do it yourself. There's quite a few pitfalls with that. I mean, obviously I can do it. I've done hundreds of them, and as I slowly wind this back, I can feel there's no resistance. It's actually a good quality seal inside there. I can feel that, and it's in great shape. So I'm going to put my mask back on, remove this last pad, and then I'm going to have a look at the slides here. Okay, so pads are out. Now we can get the caliper and this section here that mounts onto your hub versus the actual caliper itself, where the piston and everything is inside there that pushes the pads. You want to make sure these slides here are free, right? So we just do that by simply moving the caliper back and forth. Don't go too far, but that freely moves back and forth. And these dust boots here haven't been compromised, because if those calipers get if those slides get seized up, what happens is your caliper doesn't work properly and you can get uneven pad wear and your brakes won't be effective. So that's another trick. If they are seized up, again, I'd be looking for your mechanic to fix this properly, because you just don't want to compromise the functionality of it. Brake pads and discs are easy to change. Anything beyond that, you really want to get expert advice and help. It's not something that you really want to tackle yourself, in my opinion. Alright, time has come to take the old disc off. Now, some of these are held on with screws. This one isn't. It's just literally plug and play. So I want to give the face here a little tap with a hammer. Now I want to do that to break any of the surface that's been stuck together with any rust or anything like that. And you might need to give it a bit of a tap. So just along those lines, just go around, loosens it up, and off it comes, right? So that's as simple as that. The old brake disc, and you can actually see the wear on it. See the brake disc here? You've got a worn spot and a not so worn spot. That'll be right where the shuttering is coming from. Okay, so we just gave the hub a bit of a wipe down and a bit of a clean. Make sure it's in good nick. There's no burrs or anything like that on there. Our new disc just goes straight on. So these are N-Shield discs by DBA. That coating on there comes off after your first couple of applications of the new brake pads, and it just means that the disc won't rust. That surface there is fine to put straight on. If you don't have this type of disc, you may need to use brake cleaner to go over it to remove the residue that's on there first, to ensure that that's not going to compromise your new brake pads. If you don't, the vehicle won't stop as well. It's simple as that. So if you've got these N-Shield discs, you're right to go. Pretty much plug and play. If you've got the other type, you're going to have to use a brake cleaner to make sure they're nice and clean. So now we've got that on, we can go ahead and fit the new brake pads to it. You'll notice inside here where you've got these little clips. And these little clips here, and I'm just using the GoPro here to show you, you've got to make sure that the pad actually goes in between those clips, because what happens is they're designed to take the vibration out of the brake pad, and it helps stop it squealing. So if you get that wrong, don't take these out and throw them away, because the other thing that will happen is you'll get clunking of your brake pads as well. So they're designed to be in there and reduce the movement and reduce the vibration against the disc, and that helps keep that squealing down. So don't ever remove those clips, and make sure your pads go in the right way. Okay, so a couple of little tips with the brake pads when you're putting them in. This here is what's called a wear indicator. So it's designed to scrape on the disc as it gets worn down and gives you a squealing sound. So you want to make sure, as the disc rotates, when you fit it to the caliper itself to replace it, it's going to end up on the leading edge. So if the rotation is normally that direction, you want this to be on the leading edge. So that way, it'll always record the lowest point. Generally, the leading edge of the brake pad will wear down faster than the trailing edge. So that's something to remember. Make sure you get the wear indicator in the right place in the caliper when you're putting it in. So make sure you don't mess that up. Okay, so we've got the car back on the ground now. Now, one thing I want to mention is when you're pushing those pistons back to get the new pads in, make sure that you don't backfill the reservoir, the brake reservoir, because that can happen. So if you've got too much fluid in there and you're backfilling it, it's going to overflow, run down the inside of the inner guard there, and could potentially start stripping the paint off. Brake fluid's very bad for paintwork. It'll take it off in a matter of days. So you want to make sure we don't have any spillage there at all. So when you're pushing that back, just double check it. If you need to take some out, get an old syringe or something like that to remove it, or you can get a cloth that you can actually put in there and make sure the cloth is clean and take it out. One thing to remember with brake fluid is it's hygroscopic. That means it'll actually attract moisture to it. So make sure you don't leave the brake fluid reservoir cap off. It'll allow moisture to get in there, and that's also why you need to replace your brake fluid every couple of years at the absolute maximum time. So make sure you do that too. Righto, so we've got it back on the ground, everything's done. I've pumped the brake pedal to make sure that we've got plenty of pressure there, and it's all come up great. Now what we need to do is go and bed these brakes in, and after that we're finished. So when you're bedding in a new set of brake pads and discs, what you need to do is go through some brake cycles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get up to about 50 kilometers an hour. There's nothing behind me. I'm checking this, so I'm going to actually just brake. And here they're quite noisy. And that's that coating that's on those DBA rotors that is just coming off. Plus the new pads are getting bedded into the new disc. So They are a little bit noisy to start with, and most people never experience that if you haven't replaced discs and pads yourself. So up to about 50 kilometers an hour, I'm going to cycle again. Straight away, they've already got better feeling to them now. So just drive a bit further, get some air flowing through those discs, and so we're building up the heat in those discs slowly. So I don't want to do it too fast. So that's pretty much what you do. Next one I'll probably do a bit heavier and a bit more of a harder stop, and then what I'm going to do is give it a rest for a little while, and then I'm going to go through the process again, and I'm going to probably do that 2 or 3 times. Your mechanic in your workshop, they're probably not going to do that. They're probably going to get a couple of really big hard stabs on it, get that heat going, get those pads cycled in there, and that'll be about it. So now we've got really good bite going on. These discs are pulling up beautifully, and it's probably about as much heat as I want to put into them. So yeah, they're going to put them through the cycle real quick because they don't have time. They don't have time to bed them in slowly like we would like to. So just take your time, don't overdo it, and for about the first 100 Ks, just be careful on them. Don't give them too much of a hard time. Okay, so that's how you bed the brakes in. We've taken it for a good drive, we've cycled them through a few times, and we haven't gone too hard on those brake pads, especially when they're new. So it's important that you now just take it easy on them for the first 100 or so kilometers. And what I mean by that, if you have to stand on them, but don't put them through too much heat cycle, because you don't want to obviously cause a resin build-up between the brake pads and the brake disc, which is something that can happen. You want these new discs and pads to last as long as they can. And one of the ways you can actually preserve them a bit more is don't overheat them too much. And particularly in wet weather like we've got now, you don't want to get them too hot and drive through big puddles and things like that, because that can quickly warp those brake discs on you very easily. And then you've got to go through all that we've just been through again. So hopefully you found that to be a bit of a help for you to replace your brake pads and discs. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like the video. Thanks.